You've heard the story. The Mongols sacked Baghdad, tossed 1 million manuscripts into the Tigris, and the river ran black with ink for days. But here's the twist. Multiple contemporary chroniclers, like Ibn al-Athir, recorded it as fact. And we have physical evidence, layers of ash and debris matching the timeline. Yet the scale is debated. Was it truly millions? Let's separate fact from legend. But to understand what was lost, we need to back up. The House of Wisdom was the intellectual capital of the world. Founded in the early 800s, it housed translations of Aristotle, Euclid, and Galen, plus original works by al-Khwarizmi. At its peak, Baghdad held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, more than any library in Europe. So when the Mongols arrived in 1258, they annihilated a millennium of accumulated knowledge. The siege lasted just 12 days, but the aftermath was catastrophic. Books thrown into the Tigris. The water turned black with ink. It's not a legend. It's history, recorded by eyewitnesses. But how much of the story is literal? We'll examine the evidence. So, what exactly was the House of Wisdom? Imagine a library that rivaled Alexandria, a think tank where scholars from every faith translated the world's knowledge. Founded in the early 800s, it wasn't just a library. It was a research institute, an observatory, a melting pot of ideas. Inside those walls, scholars like al-Khwarizmi, the father of algebra, and al-Kindi built on Aristotle, Plato, and Euclid. They didn't just preserve ancient knowledge, they expanded it, creating original breakthroughs in math, astronomy, and medicine. This wasn't a niche project. The House of Wisdom became the intellectual engine of an empire stretching from Spain to India. Caliphs funded it lavishly, attracting scholars with salaries rivaling generals. The result? A golden age that lit up the world for centuries. By the 9th century, this institution was a full-blown research institute. Scholars from across the known world flocked here, translating everything from Greek philosophy to Indian mathematics. The library held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, the largest repository of knowledge on earth. But it wasn't just about quantity. It was about the minds behind it. Al-Khwarizmi, the father of algebra, whose work on equations shaped modern math. Al-Kindi, who wrote hundreds of books on optics to music theory. These guys weren't just translators, they were pioneers. And the diversity was mind-blowing. Jewish, Christian, and Persian scholars worked side by side, translating works from Greek, Sanskrit, and Syriac into Arabic. This wasn't just preservation, it was a fusion of ideas that sparked breakthroughs in medicine, astronomy, and engineering. So why did nobody stop the Mongols? By 1258, the Mongol Empire had swallowed half the known world. Hulagu Khan marched on Baghdad with an army of over 150,000 soldiers. The siege began on January 29th, and within 12 days, the walls fell. But the real horror came after. The Mongols didn't just kill, they erased. The library was ransacked. Manuscripts, centuries of work by al-Khwarizmi, Euclid, and Galen were thrown into the Tigris. Eyewitnesses say the river ran black with ink. But was it truly black, or just discolored? The chroniclers' accounts vary. So, is the ink in the river story just a poetic exaggeration? Some historians ask, but multiple contemporary chroniclers wrote it down. Ibn al-Athir, writing just decades later, recorded that the Tigris ran dark with ink. He was a historian documenting a catastrophe, yet his account doesn't specify how long the discoloration lasted. Did the river literally run black for months? Probably not. Historians debate the scale. But the core event is real. Thousands of manuscripts were thrown into the Tigris. The ink stained the water. It's a documented tragedy, backed by eyewitnesses. The exact number of books lost remains uncertain, but the loss was immense. So what exactly went into the river? Unique manuscripts with no copies elsewhere. Al-Khwarizmi's own hand, his original works on algebra, lost forever. Translations of Aristotle with commentary by al-Kindi, gone. The loss was the only record of centuries of original thought. And that's why the Islamic Golden Age didn't just fade, it crashed. Without those texts, the chain of knowledge snapped. Later, scholars in Europe and the Middle East had to reinvent or rediscover what Baghdad once held. the river ran black, and the world lost a library with no equal. But some knowledge survived elsewhere, preserved in other centers. But this great center didn't just appear. It was the brainchild of Caliph Harun al-Rashid and his son al-Mamun. Al-Mamun had a dream where Aristotle appeared to him, inspiring him to collect all the world's knowledge. He sent emissaries to Byzantium, India, and Persia, demanding manuscripts. This wasn't just a library, it was a mission. So how did they translate all those works? They employed a team of professional translators, often from different faiths. Hunayn ibn Ishaq, a Christian scholar, was paid in gold equal to the weight of the books he translated. He and his team produced accurate Arabic versions of Galen and Hippocrates, which later became the basis for European medicine. And the innovations were staggering. Al-Khwarizmi didn't just invent algebra, he also introduced Hindu-Arabic numerals to the Islamic world. His book On the Calculation with Hindu Numerals spread the decimal system, which eventually replaced Roman numerals in Europe. Without him, we might still be doing math with letters. But the complex was also an observatory. Astronomers like al-Battani calculated the length of the solar year with remarkable accuracy. They built instruments like the astrolabe, which could measure the positions of stars. Their tables of planetary motion were used by Copernicus centuries later. The stars were mapped in Baghdad. And medicine flourished. Al-Razi, a Persian physician, wrote the Comprehensive Book of Medicine, which compiled knowledge from Greek, Syrian, and Indian sources. He also identified smallpox and measles as distinct diseases. His works were used in European universities for centuries. This institution saved lives. So when the Mongols came, they didn't just attack a city, they attacked the world's brain. Hulagu Khan demanded surrender, but the caliph refused. The Mongols built a wall around Baghdad, then used catapults to bombard the walls. Within days, the city's defenses crumbled. The caliph was executed, and the looting began. But the looting wasn't random. The Mongols targeted the libraries specifically. They used the leather covers of books as shoes and the pages as fuel for fires. The great library was emptied. Some books were buried in pits, others thrown into the river. The goal was annihilation, erase the city's identity. So the river ran black. But chroniclers disagree on details. Ibn al-Athir says the water turned black, but doesn't mention months. Another historian, Rashid al-Din, wrote that the ink discolored the water for a while. The truth is likely that thousands of books, each with ink, stained the river, but not for months. The legend grew over time. But the destruction didn't stop at the river. The Mongols also burned countless books for fuel. Imagine the smoke rising over Baghdad. Centuries of thought, of poetry, of science, turned to ash. The loss was total, not just of physical books, but of the living tradition of oral commentary that accompanied them. Yet not everything was lost. A few fragments survived, smuggled out by scholars or hidden in remote monasteries. Today, we have only a handful of original manuscripts from that library. They're kept in museums, fragile pages that remind us what once existed. Each one is a miracle of survival. Ironically, some of Baghdad's knowledge reached Europe through Spain and Sicily, where translations of Arabic works sparked the Renaissance. So the light of that great library didn't fully die. It flickered in Toledo, in Palermo, and eventually lit the way for Galileo and Newton. The ink in the river became the ink of progress. So why does this story still haunt us? Because the ink in the river isn't just a legend, it's a warning. Every book thrown into the Tigris was a world of ideas erased forever. Today, knowledge is still fragile, but we get to choose. Protect libraries, share what we learn, and keep the light on. Because when we lose a book, we lose a piece of ourselves.